Jim from The Office writes and directs a mostly silent horror film about a smart guy taking care of a bunch of idiots. This is our review of A Quiet Place.
And lately you've seen us wearing a lot of costumes or having things here on the set, but for this particular review, no bells, no whistles. Keep it quiet.
Shut up! Shut up! Shut up!
I thought A Quiet Place was a fairly entertaining movie. I think it wants to be a little more unique than the eventual outcome of the film is. I called this movie after I watched it a show all tell nothing movie. And when you see this movie, you'll know what I'm talking about. If you've ever seen a film where you're not spoon-fed things through dialogue, through exposition from a character, this one will blow you away in that regard, whereas everything that you find out about the characters and the story is told visually, and that is the only way. There's long stretches, well, most of the movie, there's no dialogue in this movie. Spoilers, I'll say that there's maybe like 5 lines.
Yeah, not zero dialogue.
Not zero, but next to zero. But John Krasinski's the director. I think he did a great job directing, but I have other things to say about the writing, but send it to you, John.
I appreciated this movie. It was a pretty fun viewing experience, which means a lot for me, going to the movies and having a good experience watching the film. But I take a lot of the issues I think you're going to have with some of the characters and what their decision making essentially in this film. And I think it's an interesting concept, but it's a hard concept to really get behind and believe is realistic. They do a lot, I think, to play within the rules of what they've set up and stick to that, and that's admirable for this film. But it's totally unrealistic. Like, there's no humans that could live this way and really pull this off for the amount of time that in the film it's saying that they did. Living silent, essentially.
I would last a day.
Never making a sound louder than, like, that's bullshit. That's never going to take place in a world that I know.
When you figure it out, you're like, even walking. And, you know, they go through a lot of visual shots of showing how they learn how to walk around, you know, dry leaves and things like that. Still, even like the footsteps is enough to you know, to get them noticed by, you know, by the kind of the surprise of the movie. So yeah, it's just like we said after we watched it last night. You paint yourself into a corner because there's no realistic way to tell this story where even if the setup of how the characters live their lives beforehand, which kind of could prepare them to be quieter than most, it still doesn't matter. Well, how do people fart? Like, is everyone closing, sucking those things in there? That's got to be bad for your digestive system.
How do you sneeze?
How do you cough? How do you sneeze?
You mentioned if you snort at night, you're dead.
You snore, you're dead.
Coming up with a lot of creative ways that the family has been able to try to live in this situation.
Yes.
But then they make some really stupid decisions. There's things that we see in this house that they live in that if they're smart enough to know that they have to do X, Y, and Z to keep quiet, why would they still have, you know, A, B, and C around the house that causes noise? It's refrigerator logic. It's something that Hitchcock said back in the day of, while watching, you hope that the viewer, while watching the film, doesn't think about this, but when they're at home looking through the fridge for a beer, it might dawn on them of, why did the character do that? How did the character know this already?
Yeah.
And there's a lot of that. Immediately when we walked out of the movie, the three of us standing there talking, we all had multiple points of like, yeah, that didn't make sense. That wouldn't work. That could never happen that way. And so that really hurt the viewing experience afterwards.
One of the things I do when I watch a horror movie that supposedly is going to have good characters. Going into it, you think it's going to be character-driven, and you think it's going to be plot-based, but more almost dramatic, like a Conjuring 1 or something. I compare a lot of stuff to The First Descent, because The First Descent has really smart characters making decisions that are not stupid. But when you go into a movie like The Descent and you see how the characters are making decisions to keep themselves alive in the situation they're in, because that's sort of a one-trick pony film as well, you care more. When this movie opens up and you see Emily Blunt's character and the fact, this is not a spoiler, it's in the trailers, she's pregnant, all the credibility of the characters for me is gone, because why would you get pregnant in this world? So then the rest of the movie, because I think the filmmaking, I'm so torn on this movie because I think the filmmaking is good. I think Krasinski created good atmosphere, eerie feeling. I thought the pacing was good. A movie with no dialogue really had me going, and I was never lost in what was going on. I was never bored. And like I said, the editing, the shots, they were really good. But when in the writing process, when your characters seem dumb, make them less dumb before you make the movie, because everyone's dumb, and that ruins a little bit.
Yeah, and they all know the rules that they have to live by. It's very well established within the family, but they're all breaking rules at times. Not necessarily rules that immediately would make a sound, but doing dumb things that would lead to an accident, would lead to something that could make a sound.
And I think the movie's a best of dumb decisions, where it's like, this stuff could have been spread out over like a year. Oh, someone did something. Oh, someone dropped a lamp. Shit. 6 months later, blah, blah, blah. But no, I think it's the fact that it all kind of happens in this one day. Like everything that could happen happens all in one day. The 4 main characters are excellent. Like John Krasinski, that guy like was not taken seriously after The Office, and I think he was in a bunch of really stupid dud romantic comedy things.
Yeah, Ready to Wed or some bullshit.
Yeah. And now with this movie, he's definitely going to be taken more seriously for something, whether it's directing or acting. But I thought he was really good.
His direction was great, but his performance was really strong too. And he was the one character that we could really get behind as being smart and rarely making a stupid decision. But that makes sense. He's the one kind of he's leading the family. He's the one with the wife being pregnant. He's the one kind of doing all the work in the film. But she was a smart character too, and she was a strong character, and
she's very
I think
strong.
Her performance was great. All the intense moments that she goes through.
Her facial expressions were awesome.
The pain that she's put through during a few scenes in the film is very believable.
Oh yeah.
So I think their performances are great, but the kids were good too.
So I'll tell you, this movie gives new meaning to the finger in front of the mouth shush, because it's all over the place in this movie. There's some creative stuff in this movie. The way they've kind of set their compound up, it's really it's fun and inventive the way they live. Even if some of the stuff is kind of dumb and some of them make decisions where it's like, well, haven't you been doing this for quite a while now? There's something that happens in the opening scene of the movie that's really had me hooked immediately. Really had, and I'm like, this movie is not fucking around with this opening. So yeah.
Even though it's PG-13, and there's not a lot of gore in the film, but
it doesn't need to be.
It doesn't need to be. It perfectly works with its tension and its suspense.
Gore is boring. What are they just going to do? Put in like CGI blood? Yeah. You know, I mean, and that's another thing. The entities, or whatever you want to call them, the creepy crawlies, the things that go bump in the night in this film are done well. They're a little mixture of maybe slightly too much close-up CGI, but really creepy and effective looking when you see them from afar. I think.
And then sound design. There's a really great sound design in this film.
That's the best thing in the movie. Yeah.
The creepy crawlies, the sounds that come with that is really effective. The lack of sound in scenes where it's just silent, or they're trying their best to be silent, really works effectively. But I think the score sometimes comes in and kind of, I think the film could have played better if it went with more silence and a little less score.
I agree. I liked the score, but after thinking about it for a day, they could have really let that sound designer have so much fun the way Nolan did with Dunkirk, or the way the guy from Annihilation did, where it's mixing back and forth. It starts out as sound design, but without you even realizing it, it turned into the score.
I was impressed with his direction. I really was impressed with this film while watching it. I gotta say, it was a very intense viewing experience. I was wringing my hands through the entire movie. It was kind of fun. I'm normally not wrapped into horror movies with the audience as much as I was with this one. But it really did have that refrigerator logic where when I walked out of the theater, there were so many things we brought up of like, oh, that doesn't quite work. That doesn't make sense. I do admire the filmmaking on display. So for my gulp gauge score, I would give this a 6.75.
I'm excited to see where Krasinski goes next. I'll take my gulp gauge time to say that. Like, I do think the guy's got talent. I think it's made well. I'm sure there's a lot of second unit stuff in there, and he's still learning the process. But well done, competently made movie. Had me scared a couple of times, like you said, like sweaty, throwing popcorn up in the air. It was a fun movie to watch. I just wish the characters were a little bit smarter, so that I cared about them a little bit more. But ultimately, in the end, I was slightly disappointed because I was really looking forward to this one. And it just didn't hit the mark that I wanted it to. So I'm going with you 6.75 as well, and that's almost I almost got it higher. It's just a couple of things, and I'm disappointed that I give it that, but I just can't give it anything higher than that.
And I do want to bring up the final moment of the film. Felt like it did not match the tone of this film.
Yes.
That also hurt the film.
It was laughable.
Degree. It was laughable.
It turned the movie into
a Bruce Willis.
Ash versus Evil Dead.
Groovy.
Check us out on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram.
And as always, if you like this review, click like and/or subscribe to Cinema Gulp today, please, everyone. 2018. This is the year. For Cinema Gulp, this is Ben,
And this is John.
I drink it up!
Shut the fuck